Happy Friday, everyone. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. We have plenty on our plate today, so let's get started with a look at the day's highlights. Households in Korea are closing up their purses, with the latest figures showing that people spent the least in proportion to their incomes on record for the first 3 months of the year. With a month to go until people vote on whether Britain will stay in or leave the European Union, we take a look at what impact Brexit will have on the UK and the global economy. President Park Geun-hye has taken a historic step in Ethiopia. She's become the first Korean leader to address the African Union Commission, unveiling Korea's vision for the world's second largest continent. Our Kim Min-ji has this report.
Economic prosperity and mutual growth. These are the goals President Park Geun-hye unveiled at her speech at the African Union, the world's largest coalition made up of the continent's 54 countries.
오늘 대한민국 대통령으로는 처음으로 10억 아프리카인들의 평화와 화합, 번영의 염원이 담긴 아프리카 연합을 방문하게 되어 매우 뜻깊게 생각합니다.
At the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, President Park laid out Seoul's new policy toward Africa to help the Union's vision of achieving Agenda 2063 to build a more united and strong Africa. Among the many initiatives, President Park said Korea will offer educational opportunities to 6,000 African students for the next 5 years, as well as set up an innovation center to share Seoul's advanced science and ICT technologies. She also added Korea will help tackle problems related to climate change, such as land degradation and food and water shortages.
무엇보다 한국이 아프리카와 진정 나누고 싶은 것은 할 수 있다는 자신감과 도전 의식입니다. 앞으로 한국은 아프리카 특성에 맞는 맞춤형 새마을 운동이 아프리카의 크고 작은 농촌, 나아가 각국의 발전에 기여할 수 있도록 여러분과 함께 할 것입니다.
Ahead of the speech, the Korean leader met with the chair of the African Union Commission. And on Thursday, she held summit talks with her Ethiopian counterpart, Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn. The two heads of state sealed dozens of deals, including 5 projects estimated at $700 million. Seoul has agreed to support the East African state's growth and transformation plan by taking an active role in its infrastructure projects, as well as sharing its know-how in high value-added sectors like science and technology, energy, e-government, and customs. Also, an agreement involving Ethiopia's strong textile industry would allow Korean companies to take advantage of low production costs that are about 30% of that in China. Another highlight of the president's state visit is the launch of Korea Aid, a new comprehensive development assistance program that covers healthcare, food, and cultural services. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
Korean households remain reluctant to spend as income gains slow and people's post-retirement years get longer. The index gauging how much people spend in relation to their earnings continues to hit a low. Our Hwang Jae reports.
82 years and another 6 months. That's the average expected lifespan of Koreans. And as income growth remains sluggish while life after retirement gets longer, Korean households are leaning towards saving instead of spending.
Spending conditions will improve on the back of low interest rates and oil prices, but structural issues like an increased life expectancy will limit the rise, resulting in private consumption posting growth in the low 2% range this year, lower than the economy's overall growth rate.
It's no surprise then that Korean households' average propensity to consume in the first quarter hit a record low for that period since related data was first run in 2003. Statistics Korea says the index maintained an overall downward trend, coming in at 72.1% in the first 3 months of this year, down 0.3 percentage points from a year earlier. This means people spent around $72 out of a disposable income set at 100. All this when the average monthly income of households in the first quarter stood at roughly $3,800, actually marking a drop of 0.2% from the previous year when adjusted for inflation. And with the current corporate restructuring drive coupled with the ongoing household debt problem, experts say a further dent in spending is a likely scenario down the road. Hwang Jie, Business Daily.
We're now less than a month away from the UK referendum vote that will decide whether Britain will remain with or leave the European Union. To take a closer look at this, we're now joined by our Eunice Kim in the studio. Hello, Eunice.
Hello.
All right, so it's the dreaded Brexit. The EU is watching it, the US Fed is watching it, along with the rest of the world.
That's right. Breaking up is hard to do in any relationship, much less one that has lasted for more than 4 decades. A flurry of reports have been released this week from the UK Treasury and a highly respected think tank among them to urge voters to count the projected costs broken down to great detail before casting those historic votes. Take a look.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Emotions are raw on the referendum years in the making.
This could be, for the first time in history, a recession brought on ourselves. As I stand here in B&Q, it would be a DIY recession.
I think we can. I think that they're rattled on the Remain side of the campaign because they're putting out more propaganda than we've seen at any time since 1992.
The two sides are far apart on regulations, budgets, and trade. The Remain camp underlines that being part of the bloc means having access to the 28-country market, free of red tape. 45% of British goods and services are exported to the EU without tariffs. But the Leave camp is done with EU regulations and wants the freedom to make its own decisions, including how the £350 million supposedly sent to Brussels every week will be spent. Ahead of the D-4-week mark to the vote, the UK Treasury released cloudy forecasts of 2 scenarios. One, cautious, which assumes a trade pact with the EU, and a severe model, which counts out EU and WTO membership. Either way, it says the ensuing shock would be immediate and profound, with economic growth shrinking, the currency tanking, and jobs lost in the hundreds of thousands.
The pound would fall in value by between 12 and 15%. And that doesn't just mean it's more expensive when you have a holiday abroad. It means everything we import becomes more expensive, which increases inflation, and that hits family budgets.
As the Leave camp cried propaganda, a respected think tank released a more tempered forecast. Analysis by the Institute for Fiscal Studies estimated that overall growth could be, at the most, 3.5% lower without the EU. It said the projected £20 to £40 billion deficit through the year 2020 could extend Britain's austerity measures into the next decade if it still wanted to balance its books. But, of course, projections are not definitive, and the referendum is about more than economics. It's about sovereignty, a reflection of the growing Eurosceptic sentiment in the region, amid clashing opinions on everything from monetary and fiscal policy to the ongoing immigration crisis.
Well, there's no easy answer here, and it looks like we're going to see a lot more debates in the next few weeks. But are there reports on what kind of impact Brexit is going to have on the European bloc as well as the global economy as a whole?
Sure, that's a great question. And this is, of course, a deeply nationalist issue with global implications. And we are hearing from leaders, from U.S. President Barack Obama to Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. They're risked stepping on toes to discourage a British exit from the European Union. Also, the International Monetary Fund, in its half-yearly report, pointed to Brexit as a substantial risk with serious spillover potential to an already weak world economy. The IMF cut its global GDP growth forecast to 3.2% from from 3.6 in its last World Economic Outlook back in October. Meanwhile, over in Brussels this week, the head of Eurozone's finance ministers publicly conceded the June 23rd vote was one of the big risks facing the European economy in the short term.
Well, in my mind, Brexit is obviously a risk at this moment. And in the short term, probably one of the bigger risks to our economy, predominantly for the UK economy, of course, but I'm worried also about the effects for Europe, particularly the Eurozone. But I'm even more worried about the political effect of it, to be quite honest.
Now, there has been talk of further political weakening, that is, of the European Union, with the country as influential as Britain exiting the bloc. But let's stick with the economics. I mean, if the UK leaves the European Union, then what does it mean for its trade?
Yeah, and that is one of the greatest uncertainties up in the air right now. One of the major perks of being part of the EU has been having access to the bloc's single market. But with that canceled, the British government will have to renegotiate its trade pacts, which may be a bigger task than the Leave camp would lead to believe. Now, as a matter of fact, after those reports came out of the UK this week, the head of the World Trade Organization warned that an EU-less Britain would face an arduous and unprecedented renegotiation since Britain had joined the WTO under the wing of the European Union decades ago. Director General Roberto Acevedo hinted that talks could take the EU's second largest economy back to square one, with the group's 161 other members, as it loses preferential access to 58 countries outside of the EU, covered by 36 trade pacts. A WTO analysis put the added tax burden of a Brexit on British imports at £9 billion and on exported British goods, £5.5 billion.
Now, could there be an impact on the Korean economy then?
Well, Britain is not a big trade partner for Korea. Just 1.4% of Korea's total exports last year went to the UK. The EU was slightly higher at 9.1%. The impact then is expected to be indirect, that is, by way of China. China, on the other hand, its biggest trading partner is the European bloc, and its trade relations with the UK specifically also growing. So if China gets hit, Korea inevitably will be hit, as will many emerging economies that rely on China. Also, as global investors rush to safe haven assets with receding risk appetite. And that is something a lot of folks here are watching, especially as Korea deals with a 16-month streak of shrinking exports since January of last year, which we, of course, are very aware of.
Well, with those cloudy forecasts, it looks like that the Remain side will gain some momentum. And I'm sure we'll watch this all where it goes in the next few weeks.
4 weeks to go.
All right. Thank you so much for coming in today, Eunice.
You bet.
Samsung Electronics is expected to file a countersuit against Huawei Technologies after the Chinese company sued Samsung over mobile patents. According to industry watchers in Korea, the tech giant will take counteraction in a U.S. court as early as July. It usually takes at least 2 months to review a complaint in patent infringement battles. Earlier this week, Huawei filed 2 suits against Samsung with the U.S. federal court in California and in the Chinese city of Shenzhen, seeking cash compensation for alleged unlicensed use of 4G technology. Industry watchers say the Samsung-Huawei suit is likely to proceed slowly and take a different course compared to an earlier battle between Samsung and Apple. Chinese tourists to Korea created an economic effect of $22 billion last year, which made up around 1.6% of Korea's total GDP. But the revisit rate of these tourists has been sliding by the year. And our Lee Joo-young tells us what the government is doing to bring people back.
How to attract more Chinese visitors? This has been the golden question for those in Korea's tourism sector. Despite the number of Chinese tourists having been on an upward trend throughout the years, the revisit rate has come under scrutiny. It has been falling every year since 2010, reaching 20% in 2014.
I came with my daughter, but there's not really much for old couples like us to do.
There's nothing that special here besides cosmetics.
Experts say this is mainly because the country focuses on developing one-time tourism packages that center on single events.
Tourism based on events mean they're one-shot, short-term opportunities. So that means once the rush is over, people don't think to look for other Korean travel products.
Recognizing these problems, Korea Tourism Organization, or KTO, earlier launched the 2016 to 2018 Visit Korea Year initiative, which aims to improve the quality of the local tourism sector while enhancing competitiveness. In addition, it has recently come up with 88 different themed tourism packages, specifically targeting visitors from Greater China and stepping aside from shopping-oriented itineraries. The themes range from sports like going to watch soccer matches and horseback riding to Hallyu and education, all selected with the help of Korean local governments, the travel industry, and KTO branches in the Greater China area. Experts add identifying consumption patterns by using big data will be useful in the near future, as it can shed light on specific needs and create more attractions for returning visitors. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll be back next week with more business news that matters to you. Until then, goodbye.